If you are pre-diabetic, type 1 diabetic, or type 2 diabetic, you will definitely want to know which types of fruits you should avoid consuming in order to better control your glucose levels. In this week's video, I will present the 4 worst fruits for people with diabetes to consume in their daily lives, as they can increase glucose levels and, in the medium and long term, raise glycated hemoglobin, consequently promoting the onset of complications over time. Remembering that these are fruits less recommended for those with diabetes. So pay attention to the video to learn more and more. Therefore, watch until the end, as I am sure you will leave here learning even more. And the number 1 fruit is the dried fig. Unfortunately, the dried fig is a food high in carbohydrates that will cause an increase in your blood sugar. Remember that we will do a quick analysis of the nutritional table, considering 100 grams of each fruit to make it easier for you to understand, and from there you can check the percentage of carbohydrates each of these fruits has, as well as fiber, protein, fat, and so on. So initially we will evaluate the dried fig, 100 grams of which contains 249 calories, which is a quite high amount of calories for 100 grams of a fruit. In terms of carbohydrate content, it will have 63.87 grams of carbohydrates, which is a considerable amount. We will have almost 64% of carbohydrates in 100 grams of the fruit. Regarding the presence of proteins, 3.3 grams is not a protein-rich food. In terms of fat, 0.93 grams also indicates that it is not a fruit with a significant amount of fat. Regarding the presence of fiber, we will have 9.8 grams of fiber, so almost 10% is fiber, but it is not a fruit recommended for those diagnosed with diabetes. Although it is not commonly used or easily found, if you have a diabetes diagnosis and have the habit of consuming it, you may be making it harder to control your glucose levels because of the consumption of dried figs. So make a note to set this fruit aside, okay? And the second fruit is the seedless raisin, to make it easier for your understanding. Unfortunately, there are other fruits that we consider dried and have a high concentration of fructose carbohydrates with a low amount of water, making the fruit even more concentrated, which is not ideal for those with diabetes. So in 100 grams of raisin, we will have 299 calories. This is a quite high amount, even greater than that of the dried fig. In terms of carbohydrate content, we will have 79.18 grams of sugar carbohydrates, specifically fructose, meaning that almost 80% is carbohydrate, which is a recipe for increasing glucose levels. When we take the container of raisins, which usually comes in 200 or 300 grams, and eat half of it, the glucose will rise, and unfortunately, this is not beneficial for those diagnosed with diabetes. As for the presence of proteins, 3.07 grams is also not a protein-rich fruit. Regarding fats, 0.46 grams is also not a fatty fruit. In terms of fiber content, it has 3.7 grams, which is lower than that of the dried fig. So raisin should be avoided. It is a food that is not recommended for those with diabetes. So we end up considering fruits as one of the worst foods for diabetics. The third fruit is the dried apricot. Many people have doubts about consuming apricots, and unfortunately, apricots are also a food rich in carbohydrates and fructose. If you consume them in larger quantities, they will end up raising your blood sugar levels, meaning the sugar in your blood. So now we will evaluate 3 units that correspond to 30 grams of apricot, and in 30 grams there are 71 calories, 71 calories, 71 calories. In relation to the presence of carbohydrates in 30 grams of apricot, we have 19 grams of carbohydrates, meaning that 63% of the apricot is a source of carbohydrates. So rounding to 100 grams, which would be on average 10 units of apricot, we would have 63 grams of carbohydrates. So the apricot is a very small fruit, and people end up eating 5, 6, or 7 of them, which will cause an increase in blood sugar. In terms of protein content, it has 1.1 grams, so it is not a protein-rich food, it is not a protein fruit. Regarding the presence of fats, grams of fat, it is not a food that contains a significant amount of fat and has a fiber content of 2.3 grams for 30 grams of the product. So we should avoid consuming apricots because they also have a low water content, which makes them more concentrated with a higher concentration of fructose, which is the sugar that comes from the fruit and is the carbohydrate that is absorbed into the bloodstream and circulates there, increasing your glucose levels. So be careful. And the fourth fruit is the dried plum, another dried fruit that is not recommended for those diagnosed with diabetes. So in this video, you understood that dried fruits are not recommended for those diagnosed with diabetes. I want you to comment here if you would like me to record about other fruits that are not as interesting for diabetics and that diabetics should pay attention to regarding consumption, but that does not mean diabetics should avoid them. So please comment below. I want you to record a new video about fruits, since I've noticed that you are interested in learning more about fruits for diabetics, and then we can make a new video, okay? So analyzing 100 grams of dried plum, we will have 240 calories, which is also a high amount of calories for 100 grams of fruit. In terms of carbohydrate content, we will have 63.88 grams of carbohydrates, which is almost the same amount of carbohydrates found in 100 grams of apricot, representing a high amount of fructose carbohydrates that will cause an increase in your blood sugar levels. Regarding the protein content, 2.18 grams, it is not a protein-rich food, and fat, 0.38 grams of fat, a small amount of fat as well. As for fiber, 7.1 grams of fiber is an acceptable amount. So, in this week's video, you basically learned which fruits you should stop consuming. I want you to also comment here on which of these 4 fruits you habitually consume, and if you eat them with some frequency, as this way we can discuss more about it. And from there, I will create new videos to help you understand better. Is that okay? And that was this week's video, where we talked about fruits that diabetics should avoid to help manage their glucose levels and consequently gain better health, quality of life, and good blood sugar. And more balance regarding the treatment of diabetes or pre-diabetes diagnosis, okay? If you are still watching, it means you enjoyed the content. And if you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, turn on notifications, and most importantly, share this video with that friend of yours who has questions about fruit consumption. so they can understand more about dried figs and raisins. After all, it doesn't cost you anything to share it on Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp, and this way YouTube will understand that it is relevant and quality content and will start recommending it to more and more people, okay? Here on the side, I will leave more great content, so don't forget to keep binge watching the channel's videos, as this way I end up helping you find the best path to control your glucose and consequently live free of complications with better health, quality of life, good self-esteem, and a joy for living, okay? So we will leave it here. May God be with you all and see you later.